What was my inspiration for writing Weird School? Well, look, to be honest, there's quite a few different inspirations. The first was I used to be an ambassador for the Premier's Reading Challenge, which I did for many years, with a whole bunch of famous writers, people like Felicia Rena and Kirsty Murray and the great Andy Griffiths. At the end of every event, the big events, we would all sit at tables to sign our books, and the kids would line up. But of course, I didn't have any books to sign, but I was alphabetically always after Andy Griffiths. Andy would sign his books, and sometimes he would just pass the book over to me to get it signed. And I would just start signing it. Sometimes the kids would go, well, hang on, why is that guy signing the book? And then he and I would kind of take turns to make up a reason why we were getting me to sign it. And Andy might say something like, oh, Damian translates all of my books into Russian. Or I might say, yeah, I actually do all the choreography for the book. Or Andy might say, Damian's in charge of licking every page to make sure that ink isn't poisonous. And we would just go on back and forth. More than once during those events, Andy said to me, seriously, Damian, you should write a kid's book. So I always had that in the back of my mind. Now, going back to my early days, I used to be a primary school teacher, and I actually wrote a story for my kids one year. It was called The New Kid. And so I would write a chapter and read it to them at the end of the week. Anyway, the book was about, or the story was about, the start of every new year, you get a bit excited because there's a new kid coming to class. Anyway, it turns out this new kid was an alien. So it was the adventures of this small group of kids as they got to know this highly intelligent, superior life form who joined their class. I never finished it, and I always thought, oh, one day I'll finish that story and I'll get it published, or, I had no idea, to be honest. So anyway, all of that was in my head, and one day my literary agent said to me, just on a whim, she said, can you write me a kid's book? And I went, yeah, all right. So I went away, and I didn't write the new kid, but I thought, what if I wrote a story where there were a whole bunch of different weird events happening? And originally the idea was that there would be a different event in different schools around Australia. In the end, we settled on having all the stories in one school at Wally Park Primary School. So that's how I came up with the idea of writing Weird School. What is my favourite scene in the book? Look, there's a whole lot of them. I think I like the really busy scenes where all the pieces come together. I particularly love early on in the Extreme Walkathon, where all the teams have kind of massed at the Wally Park freeway and are trying to get across. And there's one team freaking out because it's a kid, panicking on the bridge. There's another team wandering around in the meadow lost. There's another team who are unfortunately dressed in orange overalls getting arrested because they look like prison escapees. The Red Baron team are flying overhead, a hot air balloon. And then, of course, Green Morrow get across the bridge because Zip Cop turns himself into the missing part of the walkway. I love those scenes. And Out of Bounds is a bit similar when they get to all the characters, the real Out of Bounds characters and the fake ones all come together in the one scene where you've got sumo wrestlers making daisy chains, white-haired relief teachers walking around like zombies, the netball court's on a weird angle because Pippa didn't know how to draw netball courts properly, all that kind of stuff. I just really love the busy stuff where you can visually picture the whole world coming to life. Which character do I relate to the most? Look, I would have to say probably Zip Cop. As I mentioned earlier, I wrote The New Kid when I was teaching a story of a new kid who starts at school who turns out to be an alien. And that's actually autobiographical because I am an alien. And it was largely based on my experiences of turning up to my primary school, which was St Mary's Primary School in Greensborough in Melbourne. I turned up and they didn't know it, of course. It was a couple of years before they worked out that I was an alien. They had a hunch, because I kept, if I forgot my bathers, I would just beam myself home and back again. If I was about to get, in trouble, I could make myself disappear. People had a bit of a hunch that I was. And also I used to get dropped off to school, in a spaceship. And a tractor beam would drop me down. So they had a hunch. And also I was 492, so when I had a birthday party and I had 492 candles on my cake, they went, hang on, that doesn't seem right. And we probably should have just made it a normal number, like a human number, but sometimes you forget. Yeah? So don't get all... But anyway, Zip Cop is the one I relate to because I'm not from Greshloot 7. I'm from Greshloot 8, which is a bit kind of down the road and just left. 19 Moons. No Kmarts. So, swings and roundabouts. Was my primary school weird? Look, a bit weird. I mean, I was a weird part in it being a 492-year-old alien from a planet with 19 moons. But to be honest, I used to be a teacher, and for a lot of the time I was a primary school teacher, and one of the schools I taught at was really weird. That was Holy Spirit Community School in North Ringwood in Melbourne. We used to play pranks to teachers on each other. You'd come back to your classroom and your desk would be gone, or there'd be a severed limb hanging out of your filing cabinet. Not a real one. So yeah, that was definitely a weird school. Or one thing we did that was really fun and weird at that school was I was team teaching with my friend Leanne in grade 4, and we turned our classroom into a simulated flight, and the kids got to stay overnight. We dressed up as pilots. We had parents dressed as flight attendants. They got kids packs. They had airline meals. We watched a movie. We had a storm. What else did we do? We blew up the classroom. No, we didn't blow up the classroom. We had customs. So at the end of the night, once they disembarked from the classroom, they went through customs. There was a bunch of school parents there doing that. They pretended that it was a non-English speaking country. They spoke gibberish. The country was Dumbumistan, which I might recognise from the Miss Lou story in Weird School. And then they went and stayed in different hotels, which were just classrooms. And that's where the fun ended, really. They had to sleep on the hard floors. And most people just wanted to go home by about 3 a.m, just in tears. Just, why are we doing this? This is the worst thing ever. No, they weren't. We put some kind of sleeping gas through the air vents, and they had a good night's sleep in the end. It was hard to wake some of them. Some took 2, 3, 4 weeks to come back to consciousness. But so yeah, you probably wouldn't get away with it today, but in those days, things were different. What's the best story that didn't make it into Weird School? Well, look, as I said earlier, the book was more of a collection of stories from different schools. So when we narrowed it down and made it just about Wally Park Primary School, it meant that some story didn't quite fit. And this is one of them. It was called The Escapologist. And the idea behind this story was this kid who came to the school. He was the new kid. And he had escaped from about 190 odd different schools. He would dig tunnels. He would make a hot air balloon. He was a master of disguise. He would get inside a, tiny box and get posted out of the school. It was pretty fun. Anyway, the school principal kept finding him and tracking him down just as he was about to escape. Like, you'd see a moving bush walk across the playground and realise, he's off again. Anyway, at the end of the story, the principal's going for a walk around the school and she can't see anyone. She goes into the first classroom, there's no one there. Second classroom, no one there. And eventually she goes into his classroom and his little head bobs up. He's dug a tunnel in the silent reading corner. And she asks where everyone is, and he says, everyone's escaped. And all the students, all the teachers, even the parents, the whole school community had escaped down his tunnel. And so the principal was like going, what do I do? And he said, it's up to you. So she jumps down the tunnel and escapes too. So that was one of my favourites that didn't quite make it into Weird School. It might be in the sequel, which is called Weird School, the sequel. Or it could be in the film, Weird School, the film. My first reaction when I saw the illustrations was, they're amazing. Adele is fantastic. I got to see a whole bunch of illustrators before we decided that Adele would do the illustrations, and I just loved her take in general. But it was such a blast to see characters that I'd written brought to life. And I remember seeing the cover for the first time and just laughing my head off when I saw Pam, the lollipop lady with her curly blue hair. And weirdly, it looks like she's got a black, hairy chest. It's actually just the top she's wearing underneath. But most people go, she's got a hairy chest. That's cool. I loved seeing Zip Cop. And I particularly loved, my favourite illustration in the book is the one of, during the Extreme Walkathon, all the kids sitting on Al Goro as they walk across the paddock full of toxic poo. I just think that picture is sweet. Look, my advice to kids who are thinking about writing a book one day, make sure that you're in... Look, there's good places and there's bad places to write a book. Like, for instance, being shot out of a cannon is a bad place. I tried that. Does not work. A good place is like a little quiet study nook where there's not lots of traffic going past. On a busy roundabout during peak hour, perched on a pogo stick, bad place. Lashed to the side of a whale, bad place. Even if they're asleep, you're still like you're gonna get wet. And it's hard to hold on. So yeah, pick a good place. It's very tempting to just start writing, but it's good to plan your story. Work out beginning, middle, end, how it's going to finish.